Welcome back to our In Focus discussion tonight. Mental health is something we all need to take seriously. A lot of folks do. Certainly a lot of things going on that can affect our mental health. At any stage of our lives, we had this pandemic that obviously threw everything in chaos. And everyone, including children, they're susceptible to issues that can affect mental health, mental well-being. And tonight we're talking about mental health for children and parents and ultimately all of us. Joining us in studio, Rebecca Dutson, the President and CEO of Children's Center, and Jennifer Mitchell, the Vice President of Clinical Strategy and Innovation. Also at the Children's Center, Rebecca, Jennifer, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this pandemic and kids being home at school and just some of the issues there, but let's just start with the basics. Tell us about the Children's Center, who it serves, and what you're all about. And
Great.
Rebecca, if you want to take that one.
You bet. Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here. The Children's Center is a nonprofit organization based in Utah. We provide mental health treatment to improve and enhance really the emotional well-being of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers and their families. We serve children ranging from birth through age 6.
And I think parents don't quite know what to look for in their children. I mean, can you talk about when you would see a child to even know what is normal and what is different? Jennifer, I mean, can you talk about the difficulty in diagnosing mental health issues for children?
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because there's a wide variety of diagnoses that older children, adolescents, and adults may qualify for. But with young children, there's much, much fewer that are appropriate for use. And that, in theory, would make it seem like it's much easier to diagnose. But the reality is it's infinitely more complex because children only have a variety of ways that they can communicate their needs to us. So things that they put into their bodies, things that they let leave their body, how they're using their body in their environment. But ultimately, that topography of behaviors, what they're doing, can actually be in search of trying to communicate something much deeper. And so in diagnosing, what we really need to do is use expertise around early childhood development, understand how early childhood experiences, starting already in the pregnancy and delivery, the postpartum period, but also the early interactions in forming important relationships with their caregivers and their loved ones and their siblings, how all of those things load on. The other thing that makes it really difficult, young children have very limited language that they can share with us. And even those that have high levels of vocabulary aren't yet sophisticated enough to really talk about the internal processes that are happening for them, the complex feelings that they have in relation to just everyday events. I mean, when we think about most adults, they're also not very good at that. So they may not even be modeling how to talk about your feelings and what's going on. So much of what we're trying to do is really in diagnosing, peeling back those onion layers, understanding the entire history that that child has experienced, understanding about the parent and caregiver's history, making lots of observations about what may be happening, and then also looking at how those things play out in terms of the child's behavior and functioning before we get to the diagnosis.
COVID has been such a unique time. Can we talk about depression or anxiety? I mean, in kids, do those disorders look different in kids than adults? Is it too early to diagnose those?
Yeah, absolutely important to consider those things, and I would say never too early when the symptoms are present. Now, it does look a lot different for younger children for reasons that we might kind of appreciate. Young children don't have this advanced life knowledge. They may not have the complicated worries that older adults and older children have related to depression or anxiety, but they do sometimes have some of the classic signs of anxiety. Fears and worries about what may be happening later at school that day, or fears and worries about separating from the people that they love. We're not likely to see the same kind of symptoms of extreme lethargy and extreme apathy and complete lack of interest in social activities, but we can see some of those things. What's really important to think about is that, again, with young children, sometimes the presentation looks a little bit different. So when we think about anxiety and depression, we consider those things to be internalizing problems or challenges, things that we experience internally that may have an external manifestation. But oftentimes young children have internal challenges that get put out in the universe in really extreme externalizing ways. So a lot of children that are suffering with underlying anxiety and depression are presenting with symptoms that are really more indicative of what we might think of as behavioral problems, some oppositionality, some rigidity, even some aggression too. So it's never too early to kind of be watchful and thinking, and certainly the pandemic has exacerbated these symptoms for many families.
And Rebecca, I guess how often should parents think about mental wellness in their young children? I think that it's so difficult to navigate each stage of your young kid's life, and now you're telling me there's mental health issues. I mean, I don't even think parents may be aware that kids could have these issues, terrible twos or throwing fits. I mean, how do you even figure this stuff out as a parent?
Yeah, you know, you raised a really good point here, and I don't think we want parents obsessing about their children's emotional and mental well-being. We do want them to be aware that children, very young children, infants, toddlers, preschoolers, have emotional health. And it's important for parents to be aware of that. That is foundational to their success throughout their entire life. So being aware of those needs and watching for the things that we're discussing tonight is really an important job for parents.
Well, I'm a parent, and I know if parents out there are listening to this, they have so many other questions. So I want to continue this discussion with both of you. Thank you so much. We'll be right back after the break. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight. It's on mental health for kids and parents. We're continuing our discussion with Rebecca Dutson and Jennifer Mitchell, both from the Children's Center. So thanks again for being here tonight. Jennifer, if we could talk about this pandemic, I mean, what are you seeing with kids right now? And, you know, if it's different than what we saw before, what do we do as parents to help kids get through this?
Well, I think the answer of what we do now is the same as it was at the start of the pandemic. Ultimately, there's a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, a lot of mixed messages and misgivings that people are having about the decisions that are outside of their control. And children are really familiar with that. They know what it's like when adults make decisions that are beyond their control. And what we need to do as parents and caregivers is the same thing we always need to do, which is help them make meaning of these really confusing times. You know, establishing routines and rituals within our own home that we can control can provide children with a sense of safety and containment that can help them process these more challenging times. And at the end of the day, just helping your children know that it's okay to come to you and to talk to you and ask the questions that they have. Because at the end of the day, it's critical that you as the caregivers are the one feeding the information to your children.
So, Rebecca, how can parents frame questions for young kids to get info they need? I'll ask my kids how school was, and they'll say good. And if they're upset, they might say I'm mad or sad. But it's so hard to sort of try to get that really detailed information, although earlier you did say even adults are pretty bad at communicating their feelings. But how do you drill down and understand what's really going on?
Mm-hmm. So much of this, I think, is layered over time and how you're building your relationship with your child. And to your point, you know, this is a constant effort that we're engaging our children in conversation with us, because so much of this is about our relationship. And when we're talking about really young children, you know, we've got to do all of those things that help us be the best listeners, get down on their level, ask them pointed questions about their day and how did they feel about things. And maybe we're going to try and help them fill in some answers, and we might be wrong sometimes. Then we need to be prepared to listen more while they try and explain in their vocabulary what they're feeling, and to help give them meaning to the experiences that they're having.
It's so fascinating that how we listen, I'm guessing, they will mirror at some point as well. There's a lot to think about as a dad. Okay, so Jennifer, what are some things parents can be on the lookout for? I mean, what's normal behavior, whatever normal is, and then what should concern them?
Well, I think to start with, normal is relative. And so as a parent and caregiver, you are the expert on your child. So look for changes in your child's behavior that are lasting in some way. Part of development means that kids can make leaps, or they can have really rough challenges while they're hitting some developmental milestone. But if the changes persist or they worsen in some way, then that's something to look out for. I think the other piece to consider is the intensity or frequency with which the challenging behaviors or emotional outbursts are happening, and that at any point when this feels like beyond what you can manage as a caregiver, then that's something to really alert you to maybe something may be amiss and that you might need some support.
So Jennifer, at what point should parents actually seek out help? If they're noticing something, they probably don't want to admit that it's happening at first, and then eventually they're saying, okay, I got to do something here. I think this is off. My gut tells me something. When do they seek out outside help, and then who do they call? I'm guessing you, but I mean, where do you even start as a parent?
Well, I think to start, if it's your gut reaction is that something may be amiss, checking with whatever trusted healthcare provider is in your network and asking the questions and getting some guidance about what next steps could be. In terms of the things to be looking for, I like to talk about a story with a little kiddo that is throwing a tantrum over a cookie. Many kids will have a tantrum that looks like the end of the world, and as parents we may look at that and think, it's not the end of the world, it's just a cookie. But at the end of the day, the child's internal experience is that their bodies will spontaneously combust if they can't get that cookie in that moment, because they don't have the lived experience to know what to do with all these complex feelings. And that's normal in and of itself. When the child can't reach out for help, can't accept the support that a caregiver is giving to help calm down, and doesn't calm down in a short amount of time, that's telling, and that's concerning, and that's something that suggests you may need some help.
Wow. Rebecca, let's talk about the caregiver and early childhood funding in the Jobs Act that the current administration is proposing. Help us understand what it all means.
I think it's a great outcome for kids. And I just am personally, of course, in favor for more resources for children and families. As we've talked through the conversation this evening, we just understand how important it is that children are surrounded by individuals who care about them, who have the skills to help take care of them. Many of our families, both parents or caregivers, are working, and we need child care providers and preschool providers who have the resources and training to help children in the same way that their families are committed to them. So these resources are important. I think it's a generational investment that it's time we make, and we're excited about the prospects.
Jennifer, I have a curiosity question, Parenting 101. Your kid is crying. What you want to do is distract them, help them smile again, but it feels like that's probably not helping them deal with their emotions. What do you do instead of distracting them to get them to smile, to help them move through that in a healthy way?
It's such a great question, and ultimately what we need to do is respond to the distress. If we respond with anything other than nurturance, and nurturance can look different for different ages, what we're saying is your emotions don't matter. What we're saying is, I don't see you in the struggle that you're having right now. And that's a very isolating feeling for a child, and the last thing any caregiver would want their child to feel. So responding with, I see you, this is hard for you, something authentic in your own words, but really attending to the distress the child is feeling is most important.
Absolutely, because you think the cookie's not a big deal, but if you actually put yourself in their shoes, it is a big deal.
It is.
And then you tell them that those feelings don't matter. And anyway, I have just loved this conversation. Rebecca Dutson, President and CEO of the Children's Center. Jennifer Mitchell, Vice President of Clinical Strategy and Innovation at the Children's Center. Thank you both so much for being on tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight. It's on mental health for kids and parents, and it is a huge topic this year. Joining us now is Rob Westman, the Executive Director for NAMI Utah. And Rob, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just talked about children, and let's talk about parents now. I mean, NAMI must be seeing folks who are having issues with parenting all the time, and then we had COVID. Why don't we just start? You're talking to parents out there. What do you want to say?
I think the biggest thing we see with parents is that they don't really know where to start. They see things, they don't know what it is. And NAMI can help with that. I mean, we help people understand what it is they're seeing, and we also help people to communicate what it is they want to say, because parents sometimes don't really know what they want to say either.
Well, let's talk about postpartum depression for moms out there. I mean, it can take on many forms. It can have a long tail. It happens at the same time as just being a brand new parent, as if that's not so difficult. What do the husbands and then also to the women out there who have postpartum depression? What's your message to both parties?
This kind of goes along with what we talked about in the last segment. Is we kind of are experts with our own families, and we start to notice when things are not going the way that we would expect them to, and that really is the time to reach out and get help. We don't know what's happening, and postpartum depression especially is a very serious disorder that requires a number of effective treatments, and we don't want to guess. And I think the thing, and we were talking about this earlier, it's really around the stigma. If I'm not willing to reach out and ask for that help, it's going to be a much worse outcome. And that's really what, you know, this Mental Health Awareness Month is all about, is we want to increase the awareness so that people feel like they can reach out when they notice things aren't going quite the way they think they should be.
So many things during COVID have caused trends. Lumber prices are up. The microchips, there's a shortage. And then you hear therapists are booked and you can't get in. So is that something that should scare people away? I mean, can we talk about, I guess number one, are there more mental health issues from COVID? And then number two, if folks are like, well, I can't even get into a therapist, I'm not even going to call. What's your message to them?
You know, we know it can be frustrating, yet we really want people to reach out. And there are a number of options in terms of online supports, telephone supports. We really want people to begin that process. There may be a wait, but there's also a wait for medical care as well. And so we really want folks to feel comfortable, reach out, you know, and really what it becomes is it's a family issue. You know, parents will help kids and parents will help each other to access the services they need. And we always say that people aren't alone, and we want people to know that they're not alone. And it may take some doing, but there is help available.
Are you seeing any trend lines with either men or women during this pandemic? Because I imagine men, it's probably harder for them to recognize they need help and then to actually get the help. I just wonder if you saw any trend lines for either gender during the pandemic.
You know, it's a tough question because we're still in it a little bit. And, you know, one of the things we really heard was our family dynamic has changed. Folks are at home more than they used to be. Folks are interacting more, and in some cases that was a real positive. Folks got to get to know one another as a family again and all of that. It's hard to say. We didn't really see a noticeable differentiation between, you know, men and women, other than everyone was experiencing increased stress, increased anxiety, and we really want to encourage people to reach out and get that help.
Well, tell us what kind of help there is out there, the resources that NAMI provides that might be able to help folks sort of navigate life in general, and then obviously during the pandemic.
Right. You know, one of the things we do, we offer free education courses. So if you're seeing something in your family that you're not quite sure what's happening, we have a class for that. We can help teach you kind of what it is you're seeing, how to communicate with the folks that you're seeing those behaviors in, and really kind of, it's a couple of things. It's letting you know that you're not alone in that process. You'll attend these courses with other families and individuals who are going through the same thing. So that's a huge piece of it, is understanding not only what you're seeing, but that you're not the only one who's going through this.
Rob, I have a question for you. I guess we could either ask one of two questions. So what did COVID cause in people's mental health? Or maybe a little bit more curious I am, what did it expose about us or our family dynamics that was already there maybe that we now realize?
It's a really, really good question. You know, one of the things I would say is that, you know, we've heard about how the pandemic made us feel more isolated. But I think at the same time, what we also found is that people had been a little bit isolated from their families and their caregivers and such. And so when we saw that when people were kind of back together, that we, you know, saw some reconnecting within families and such, it was a really interesting piece. And so what I'm hopeful of is that we take the best of what came out of the pandemic and we keep that moving forward. So closeness with families and multiple ways to access treatment and services. So that's what I'm hopeful for moving forward.
Well, we need to end on a hopeful note. Can we talk about the fundraiser walk real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then I think we got to go to break.
Okay, so NAMI walks May 22nd. There's a picture from one of the walks previously when we did the in-person events. This is a virtual event. It's described in detail on our website, namiut.org. And basically, we're doing the same thing. We want to increase awareness of mental health issues and doing it in the way that we can this year.
Absolutely. Okay, Rob Westman, Executive Director of NAMI Utah. Thank you for taking my questions and for being on tonight.
Thank you.